The night was cruel in the way only the plains could be, cold that didn't just bite the skin but crept into the bones and whispered that sleep meant death. The wind dragged itself across the earth like something alive, carrying dust, regret, and the smell of old fires long gone. Somewhere beyond the rise of land, a coyote cried, and the sound felt like it belonged inside her chest. She stood near the edge of the road with a coat too thin to matter and boots that had long since given up pretending to protect her feet. Her hands were cracked, red, and trembling, not from fear but from knowing there was nothing left to bargain with except herself. Hunger had stripped her pride weeks ago. Cold had finished the rest. When the rider appeared, she almost didn't believe him real. A lone cowboy, slow-moving, his horse steady and patient, as if the world had taught them both not to rush anymore. He didn't look rich. He didn't look powerful. He looked tired in a way that came from carrying too many winters on one's back. He reined in when he saw her, eyes sharp but not cruel. That alone surprised her. Most men looked through her or at her like a thing already used up. "I'm not worth much," she said before he could speak, her voice hoarse, stripped of softness. "But I'll spread my legs for a warm bed." The words fell between them like something dead. The cowboy didn't move for a long moment. His face didn't change the way she expected. No hunger, no grin, no quick agreement. Just a long, heavy silence that made her suddenly want to run, even though she had nowhere left to go. "That's a hard way to introduce yourself," he finally said. She laughed once, sharp and bitter. "Hard ways are all I got left." For he looked at her then, really looked. The bruises time had put under her eyes, the way her shoulders curved inward like she'd learned to take blows without flinching, the way she stood ready to be rejected before it happened. "Bar. I've got a fire," he said, "and a roof. That's all I'm offering tonight." Burr, she narrowed her eyes. "Nothing's free." Burr, he nodded. "You're right. You can help with the horses, and you can eat, and you can sleep without freezing." "Bar and after?" she asked. "After," he said quietly. "We'll see what morning thinks of us." Bar, she followed him not because she trusted him, but because hope, even the smallest scrap, was warmer than the road. Their cabin was small but solid, built by hands that valued usefulness over beauty. The fire cracked and popped like it was glad to be alive. He handed her a bowl of stew without ceremony, then turned his back to give her space. That small kindness hurt worse than cruelty ever had. Bar, she ate like someone afraid the food might vanish if she slowed down. When she finished, her hands shook less. The world felt slightly less sharp. Bar, he laid out a blanket near the fire, not beside his bed. "You can sleep there," he said. She stared at it, confused. "That's it?" "That's it." Her voice came out quieter. "You don't want—" "I want a lot of things," he said, "but not like that." Something in her chest cracked. Not relief exactly, not disappointment either. Something unfamiliar. That night she slept without dreaming for the first time in months. And the cowboy sat awake long after the fire burned low, listening to her breathe, wondering how a world could break a person so completely and still expect them to keep walking. Before the story goes any further, if you feel the weight of this journey already, subscribe to our channel and share this story with your friends. These are the voices history forgot, and they deserve to be heard. Morning light didn't ask permission as it spilled into the cabin. She woke stiff, disoriented, expecting the ache of the road, the familiar panic of being moved along. Instead, there was warmth. The fire had been kept alive. The cowboy was already outside. She found him splitting wood, movements practiced, efficient, silent. He nodded once when he saw her, nothing more. She worked that day without being asked, cleaned, mended, helped where she could, not because she owed him, but because for the first time in a long while, her effort felt like it meant something. They didn't talk much at first. Words were dangerous things. They carried expectations. But evenings stretched long, and silence eventually softened. Her story came out in pieces. A drunk father, a husband who'd learned violence before kindness, a child she'd buried under frozen ground with no marker because markers cost money. Each piece laid down carefully, like she was afraid the truth might shatter if dropped too fast. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer false comfort, just listened. His story was quieter, A war that ended but never really let him go. A wife buried under prairie grass. A ranch sold piece by piece until there was nothing left but this cabin and a horse too stubborn to die. Loneliness, it turned out, had many accents but said the same things. Weeks passed. Winter pressed closer. She stayed. One night, sitting by the fire, she finally said it, the thing that had been sitting between them since the road. "I meant what I said that night." He didn't look at her. "I know. And you still didn't take it." "No. Why?" He finally met her eyes then. "'Cause I've seen what happens when people think their bodies are all they have left. And I won't be the man who proves them right." Tears came before she could stop them. Not loud, not dramatic, just heavy. When he reached for her hand, it wasn't possession. It was permission. What happened between them grew slowly, carefully, built on shared mornings and quiet trust. When they finally lay together, it wasn't a transaction. It wasn't desperation. It was two broken people choosing warmth without shame. The world outside remained harsh, but inside that small cabin, something rare took root. She was not worthless, and he was not alone. The storm came in without warning, the kind that didn't announce itself with thunder, but crept across the land like a decision already made. By the time the sky darkened to that heavy iron color, the wind had teeth, and the air smelled of snow even though it was weeks too early for it. The cowboy was outside when it began, wrestling with a loose shutter that had survived worse winters than this one, but seemed tired of proving it. She watched from the doorway, her hands wrapped in a borrowed coat that still smelled faintly of smoke and horse. The coat was too big for her, but she liked that. It made her feel smaller in a way that wasn't shameful, like she could disappear into it if she needed to. When a gust nearly knocked him sideways, she stepped forward without thinking, bracing the wood with her shoulder until he could secure it. "Be careful," he said, breath fogging the air. "This one's got a mean streak." "So do I," she answered, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. He glanced at her then, something like a smile trying and failing to reach the surface. They finished the work in silence, the wind screaming its disapproval as if offended by their refusal to yield. Inside, the cabin felt smaller than usual, the storm pressing in from all sides. The fire was built higher, fed more often. Shadows climbed the walls and settled into the corners like listeners. She sat on the floor near the hearth, mending a tear in one of his shirts with careful, patient hands. The needle moved the way her life now did. Slow, deliberate, no wasted motion. "You don't have to do that," he said, from where he cleaned a rifle that hadn't been fired in years. "I know," she replied. "I want to." That seemed to be the difference between her old life and this one, wanting instead of owing. The wind howled harder as night fell, and snow finally began to spit against the window, each tap like a question. She had lived through storms before, under bridges and abandoned sheds curled around herself like an apology. But this one felt different. This one had walls, heat, a man who didn't look at her like she was already gone. Later, when the fire had settled into a steady burn, she spoke without looking up. "If I leave tomorrow, will you stop me?" For he considered the question, weighing it like something physical. "No." "Or would you want to?" "Yes." Her hand stilled. The needle pricked her finger, a bright bead of red rising to the surface. She stared at it, oddly fascinated. Pain used to be a language she understood well. This one felt manageable. She pressed the wound to her lips, then tied off the thread. "Then I'll stay, at least until the storm decides what it's doing." Or the storm decided to stay. By morning, the world outside was erased, white everywhere, thick and blinding. The road she'd come from no longer existed. The fences were ghosts. Even the horizon had vanished. It was like the land had been wiped clean, given a chance to start over. They worked together that day, moving feed, checking the animals, doing the quiet, necessary things that kept life going when nature turned unforgiving. At one point, a sheep slipped on the ice and panicked, bleating in terror. She moved without hesitation, calming it with low sounds and steady hands. The cowboy watched her with something like awe, as if seeing a skill he hadn't known to name before. "You're good with them," he said. "They don't expect much," she answered, "just patience." He nodded. People could learn from that. That night the storm pressed closer, rattling the windows, testing the door. Sleep came in pieces. She woke once to the sound of him coughing softly in the other room, the kind of cough that came from old damage. Without thinking, she rose, wrapped the coat tighter around herself, and brought him water. He looked up, startled, vulnerable. She had never seen a man look like that without turning it into anger. "Thank you," he said quietly. She sat on the edge of the bed until the coughing passed. Neither of them moved to change the moment into something else. The closeness was enough. In the dark, she spoke words she hadn't planned to. "That night on the road, I didn't just mean the bed." He waited. "I meant I didn't think I had anything else to offer. Not work, not kindness, not staying." He stared at the ceiling for a long time. "The world teaches some lessons real hard," he said. "Doesn't mean they're true." She swallowed. "They feel true." "So does cold," he replied. "But you can survive it." When she returned to her blanket by the fire, sleep finally, me, and this time she dreamed, not of pain, not of running, but of standing in a field she didn't recognize. The wind gentle, the ground solid under her feet. Days blurred together as the storm lingered. They talked more, about small things at first, the taste of good coffee, horses with bad tempers, songs that got stuck in your head and refused to leave. Then slowly about larger things, regret, fear, the strange guilt of surviving when others didn't. One evening, as snow fell thick and silent, she asked, "Do you ever feel like you're living on borrowed time?" "All the time," he said. "Difference is, I don't think it belongs to anyone else." She smiled at that, a real smile. It felt unfamiliar on her face, like trying on a dress that didn't quite fit yet, but might someday. The closeness between them deepened in ways neither rushed. A hand brushing another's in passing. A shared look over a small victory. Trust built not with promises, but with consistency. He never asked for more than she offered. She never felt like she had to give something to earn her place. When they finally crossed the invisible line between them, it happened quietly. No grand declaration. Just a night when the storm was loud, the fire low, and loneliness felt like a language they both spoke fluently. He asked with his eyes before his hands. She answered without words. Afterward, she lay awake, waiting for the familiar hollow feeling. It didn't come. Instead, there was warmth that had nothing to do with bodies, a sense of being seen without being measured. Morning found her calmer than she could remember being. She stepped outside and breathed in the cold air, sharp and clean. The storm was breaking. The sky showed a pale strip of blue on the horizon. Behind her, the cowboy stood in the doorway, watching her like he was afraid she might vanish if he blinked. "I'm not saying this is forever," she said without turning. "I wouldn't ask you to," he replied. "But," she continued, "it's real. Right now." "That's enough," he said. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she believed it.